The garden was silent, save for the whisper of leaves and the faint creak of an old man's knees. At 90, Elias Wren knelt among his roses, his gnarled hands cradling a bloom as if it were a newborn. Then came the sirens, tearing through the dawn, accusing him of a crime that would unravel a town's soul. Elias had lived in Willow Creek for all his years, a quiet man whose garden was his legacy. His cottage, tucked at the edge of town, overflowed with flowers that seemed to defy seasons, roses that bloomed in November, lilies that thrived through frost. Townsfolk called it magic, though Elias only smiled and said, "Love makes things grow." His hands, rough as tree bark, had planted every seed, tended every root. To the children, he was Grandpa Eli, the man who gave them sunflowers taller than themselves. To the adults, he was a relic of simpler times, a reminder of what care could create. But to the police who stormed his garden that morning, he was a thief. The accusation was absurd, yet it cut deep. Elias Wren, at 90, was charged with stealing rare orchids from the town's botanical conservatory. The evidence: a single petal found in his garden, delicate and violet, matching a missing prize bloom. The conservatory's director, Margaret Hale, a woman with sharp eyes and sharper ambitions, insisted Elias had crept in at night, pilfering what she'd spent years cultivating. "He's not as frail as he looks," she told the officers, her voice cold as the winter air. The town, once united by Elias's kindness, fractured. Some believed the charge greed could twist any heart, they whispered. Others defended him, unable to imagine their gentle gardener as a criminal. Elias sat in his kitchen, the weight of suspicion pressing against his frail shoulders. His hands trembled as he poured tea, the same hands that had coaxed life from barren soil. "I've never taken what wasn't mine," he said to his neighbor, Clara, who'd braved the gossip to visit. Clara, a retired librarian with a heart as fierce as her reading glasses, believed him. She saw the pain in his eyes, the way they lingered on the garden outside, now trampled by police boots. "We'll fix this, Eli," she promised, though doubt gnawed at her. The town's trust, once as steady as his roses, was wilting. As news spread, Willow Creek buzzed with whispers. The local paper ran a front-page story, "90-year-old gardener or master thief?" The headline stung worse than the cold. Elias, who'd never sought attention, became a spectacle. Reporters camped outside his cottage, their cameras flashing like vultures circling. Children stopped coming for sunflowers. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid him. Yet Elias kept tending his garden, his movements slower, his smile fainter. Each night, he sat by his window, staring at the stars, wondering how a life of giving could lead to this. Clara, undeterred, began digging. She combed through library archives, old botanical journals, anything that might explain the petal. She found nothing conclusive, but her resolve grew. "If they want to fight, they'll get one," she muttered, her glasses slipping down her nose. She rallied a small group: Tom, the baker whose arthritis Elias eased with herbal teas; Lila, a teenager who'd learned to garden at his side; and Father Michael, the priest who'd known Elias since boyhood. Together, they formed a quiet rebellion, determined to clear his name. Then came the twist. A stranger arrived in Willow Creek. She called herself Iris, a botanist with a sharp jaw and a guarded smile, claiming she'd come to study the town's flora. She lingered near Elias's garden, asking questions that felt too pointed, her notebook filled with sketches of his roses. Clara, suspicious, watched her closely. Iris seemed to know more about the conservatory's orchids than she let on, and her presence stirred unease. Was she an ally or another accuser? Her arrival shifted the story, casting shadows where there'd been only doubt. The town's annual festival loomed, a celebration of Willow Creek's gardens, now tainted by the scandal. Margaret Hale announced a live TV broadcast from the conservatory, promising to unveil the truth about the theft. Elias, invited as a guest of honor before the accusations, was now expected to attend in shame. Clara urged him to stay home, but Elias shook his head. "If I hide, they've already won," he said, his voice steady despite the tremble in his hands. He would face the town, the cameras, the world. The festival day dawned bright, but tension hung like fog. Elias walked to the conservatory, his cane tapping the cobblestones, Clara at his side. Iris followed at a distance, her notebook tucked under her arm. The crowd parted as Elias entered, their whispers a mix of pity and scorn. Margaret stood on a stage, the missing orchid's empty pot displayed like a trophy. Cameras rolled, capturing every moment. Elias's heart pounded, but his eyes held a quiet fire. Whatever truth was coming, he would meet it standing tall. The conservatory's glass walls gleamed under the festival lights, but inside, the air was thick with judgment. Elias Wren stood at the edge of the crowd, his weathered hands gripping his cane, his eyes fixed on the empty orchid pot. Margaret Hale's voice boomed through the microphone, accusing him with a smile that cut deeper than her words. Margaret's speech was a performance, polished and venomous. She recounted the orchid's rarity, its value, the years she'd spent nurturing it. And yet, she said, pointing to Elias, this man thought he could take it for himself. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others shifting uncomfortably. Elias felt their stares like thorns, but he didn't flinch. Clara, beside him, clenched her fists, her loyalty a shield against the growing hostility. Lila, the teenage gardener, stood nearby, her eyes darting nervously to Iris, who lingered at the back, scribbling in her notebook. Iris's presence gnawed at Clara. The botanist had been asking questions about Elias's garden, his methods, even his past. She'd visited the conservatory too, chatting with Margaret in hushed tones. Clara's instincts screamed that Iris knew something that could either save Elias or bury him deeper. When Iris caught Clara's gaze, she offered a cryptic smile, then slipped into the crowd. Clara whispered to Tom, the baker, keep an eye on her. Tom nodded, his arthritic hands steady with purpose. As Margaret's speech reached its peak, she invited Elias to the stage. The cameras zoomed in, their lenses hungry for his reaction. He climbed the steps slowly, each one a mountain, but his back stayed straight. Speak, Mr. Wren, Margaret said, her tone dripping with false pity. Tell us why you did it. Elias looked out at the sea of faces, some familiar, some strangers, all waiting for him to crumble. Instead, he spoke softly, his voice carrying the weight of 90 years. I've spent my life growing things, not taking them. If that petal came from my garden, it wasn't by my hand. The crowd stirred, some moved by his sincerity, others unconvinced. Margaret scoffed, holding up a photograph of the petal found in Elias's garden, its violet hue unmistakable. Explain this, then, she demanded. Elias shook his head, his eyes tracing the petal's shape. I can't, he admitted, and the crowd's murmurs grew louder. Clara's heart sank, but then she noticed Iris pushing through the audience, her notebook now open, her expression urgent. In a moment that froze the room, Iris stepped onto the stage uninvited. I can explain it, she said, her voice cutting through the noise. Cameras swiveled to her, and Margaret's smile faltered. Iris held up her notebook, revealing a sketch not of Elias's roses, but of the conservatory's orchid. This petal didn't come from Elias's garden, she said. It came from a hybrid I developed years ago, a gift I sent to this conservatory, mislabeled and forgotten. The crowd gasped, and Clara's eyes widened. Iris wasn't just a botanist, she was the orchid's creator. Iris explained, her hybrid, thought lost, had been sent to Willow Creek a decade ago. Margaret, unaware of its origins, had claimed it as her own achievement. When it went missing, she jumped to accuse Elias, whose garden was the only one rivaling her conservatory's beauty. The petal in Elias's garden? A seed carried by wind, nothing more. Iris's revelation turned the tide, but questions lingered. Why had she stayed silent until now? And why had she come to Willow Creek at all? Elias listened, his face unreadable. The crowd's mood shifted, whispers of doubt, now aimed at Margaret. Clara, though relieved, sensed Iris was holding something back. The botanist's eyes kept flickering to Elias, not with accusation, but with something deeper, regret, perhaps, or recognition. Father Michael, watching from the side, leaned toward Clara. She knows him, he whispered. I saw her at his cottage years ago, before she left town. Clara's mind raced. Iris wasn't a stranger, she was tied to Elias's past. As the broadcast continued, Margaret's composure cracked. She stammered, insisting she'd acted in good faith, but the cameras caught every falter. Elias, still on stage, said nothing, his silence louder than any defense. The crowd began to chant his name, a slow swell of support that drowned out Margaret's protests. Lila, tears in her eyes, ran to Elias, hugging him tightly. "I knew you didn't do it," she whispered. Elias patted her shoulder, his smile returning, faint but real. But the story wasn't over. Iris's revelation had cleared Elias's name, but her presence hinted at a deeper truth, one that Clara vowed to uncover. As the festival ended, Elias returned to his garden. The cameras gone, the crowd dispersed. He knelt among his roses, his hands steady again, but his thoughts far away. Iris lingered nearby, watching him, her notebook now closed. Whatever she knew, whatever tied her to Elias, it was a secret that could change everything. Elias Wren's garden was whole again, its trampled beds replanted, its roses defiant in the morning light. But the shadow of Iris's revelation lingered, a question mark etched in the soil. Clara, relentless as ever, was determined to unearth the truth connecting the botanist to the gardener she'd sworn to protect. The town buzzed with the aftermath of the broadcast. Margaret Hale, humiliated on live TV, had retreated from the conservatory, her accusations crumbling under Iris's evidence. Willow Creek rallied around Elias, their faith restored. Children returned, clutching sunflowers, their laughter filling the air. Tom baked Elias a loaf of his best sourdough, and Father Michael offered a quiet prayer of thanks. But Clara couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't finished. Iris's sudden arrival, her knowledge of the orchid, her cryptic glances at Eliasit all pointed to a past unspoken. Clara invited Iris to her home, the library's old books stacked around them like silent witnesses. "Who are you to Elias?" Clara asked, her voice firm but not unkind. Iris hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of her notebook. "I'm someone who owes him," she said finally, her eyes distant. She spoke of a time decades ago, when she was a young botanist, ambitious and reckless, studying under Elias's quiet guidance. He'd taught her how to listen to plants, to see their secrets. But she'd left Willow Creek abruptly, chasing her career, leaving behind a promise she never kept. The twist came softly, like a petal falling. Iris revealed she was Elias's daughter not by blood, but by choice. As a teenager, orphaned and alone, she'd been taken in by Elias and his late wife, Rose. They'd raised her as their own, teaching her the language of flowers. But Iris, hungry for more than a small-town life, had left without a goodbye, cutting ties to chase her dreams. The hybrid orchid, her creation, was meant as a gift to Elias, a way to say she hadn't forgotten. Instead, it had sparked the accusation that nearly destroyed him. Clara listened, her heart heavy. "Why didn't you tell him you were back?" she asked. Iris's voice broke. "I was ashamed. I thought he'd hate me for leaving." She'd come to Willow Creek to make amends, hiding her identity until the theft forced her hand. The broadcast hadn't just cleared Elias's name. It had been her confession, her way of stepping back into his life. Clara took Iris to Elias's cottage that evening. The old gardener was pruning his roses, his hands steady despite the years. When he saw Iris, his eyes widened, then softened. "You came back," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Iris nodded, tears falling. "I never stopped being your daughter," she said. They stood in the garden, the past blooming between them like a long dormant seed. Elias didn't ask for explanations. He only opened his arms, and Iris stepped into them, the years melting away. The town, unaware of this reunion, continued to heal. Lila, inspired by Elias's resilience, started a community garden project, rallying kids to plant alongside him. Tom and Father Michael organized a fund to restore the conservatory, now under new leadership. But Clara knew the real story lay in the quiet moments in Elias teaching Iris how to prune again, in their shared laughter over old memories. The garden, once a battleground, became a bridge. Yet one question remained. Iris's notebook held more than sketches. It contained letters, unsent, written to Elias over decades. Clara, glimpsing one, saw words of regret, love, and a secret Iris hadn't shared. The orchid wasn't just a gift. It was a hybrid bred from a rose Elias had created for his wife, a bloom he'd thought lost forever. Iris had kept it alive, a piece of his heart preserved in her work. Should she tell him? Clara wrestled with the choice, knowing it could deepen their bond or reopen old wounds. As Elias and Iris worked side by side, the garden seemed to glow, its colors brighter, its air sweeter. Willow Creek, too, felt renewed, as if the truth had watered its roots. But Clara sensed the story wasn't over. The letters, the rose, the weight of years unspoken, they hinted at a final revelation, one that could either mend or break the fragile peace. The garden was a symphony of color, each bloom a note in Elias Wren's quiet song. He and Iris worked together now, their hands moving in rhythm, as if the years apart had been mere seasons. But Clara, holding the secret of Iris's letters, knew the final truth could change everything. Spring had come to Willow Creek, and with it, a sense of renewal. Elias's cottage was no longer a place of whispers, but a haven where townsfolk gathered. Lila's community garden thrived, children planting seeds under Elias's watchful eye. Iris, now a fixture by his side, shared stories of her travels, her voice weaving new life into old memories. Yet Clara saw the weight in her eyes, the unspoken words in her notebook. The letters, tucked away, held the key to a rose that tied Iris to Elias's past and to his late wife, Rose. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Clara made her choice. She sat with Elias and Iris in the garden, the air thick with the scent of blooming jasmine. "Iris has something to show you," Clara said, her voice gentle but firm. Iris froze, her hands clutching the notebook. Elias looked at her, his eyes kind but searching. "What is it, child?" he asked, the old endearment slipping out. Iris hesitated, then opened the notebook, pulling out a letter yellowed with age. The letter was written to Rose, Elias's wife, years before Iris left Willow Creek. In it, Iris poured out her gratitude for the family they'd given her, her fear of never being enough. But the final lines revealed the secret. Iris had taken a cutting from Rose's favorite rose, the one Elias had bred for their wedding. She'd spent years perfecting a hybrid, blending it with her orchid to create the bloom that sparked the theft accusation. "I wanted to give you both something eternal," Iris read, her voice breaking. "I thought it could bring us back together." Elias's hands trembled as he took the letter, his eyes tracing the words. He hadn't known the rose still lived, not in Iris's work, not in the orchid that had nearly cost him his name. "You kept her alive," he whispered, tears falling. Iris sobbed, and they held each other, the garden a witness to their healing. Clara, watching, felt the weight of her choice lift. The truth hadn't broken them, it had made them whole. Willow Creek learned of the rose's story, and it became legend. The community garden was renamed Rose's Haven, a tribute to love that endured through time and trial. Elias, at 90, found new strength, teaching Iris and Lila the secrets of his craft. The town, once divided, grew closer, their trust in each other replanted like seeds in spring. Margaret Hale, humbled, sent a quiet apology, and Elias accepted it with a nod, his heart too full for grudges. But the story's heart lay in the quiet moments. Elias showing Iris how to graft a new rose, their laughter mingling with the wind. Lila sketching the garden for a school project, her pride in Elias shining through. Clara, her glasses slipping, smiling as she watched the family she'd helped mend. The letters, now shared, were read aloud at a town gathering, each one a thread in the tapestry of Elias's life. They spoke of love, loss, and the courage to return. As summer bloomed, Elias stood in his garden, Iris at his side, the rose-orchid hybrid thriving in a pot between them. He looked out at Willow Creek, at the faces that had doubted and believed, at the earth that had always been his truth. "Love makes things grow," he said, his voice steady, his smile wide. And in that moment, the garden, the town, and the world seemed to agree.